We are going to hear from President Obama, who spoke in the White House Rose Garden today about his jobs plan. The Associated Press writes about it this way, that he wants no games, no politics, no delays. Live now to the House.
The President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker.
Madam Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Thank you, ma'am.
The Chair lays before the House an enrolled bill.
H.R. 1249, an act to amend Title 35 United States Code to provide for patent reform.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Recorded votes on postponed questions will be taken after 6:30 p.m. today. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2076, the Investigative Assistance for Violent Crimes Act of 2011, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 121, H.R. 2076, a bill to amend Title 28 United States Code to clarify the statutory authority for the long-standing practice of the Department of Justice of providing investigatory assistance on request of state and local authorities with respect to certain serious violent crimes and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 2076 as amended currently under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Violent crimes that impact multiple victims and mass shootings in particular are unpredictable, and in addition to sending shockwaves through the communities impacted, often test the resources of the state and local law enforcement jurisdictions involved. Regrettably, within our lifetime, there have been scores of mass shootings ranging from restaurants to high schools to universities and churches. No place is safe. There are no sanctuaries left anymore, Mr. Speaker, in our culture. And despite the tremendous training, education, and hard work of the brave women and men in state and local law enforcement, these types of tragedies can test even the most well-resourced law enforcement agencies. Not only is there an active crime scene with victims, there are hundreds of pieces of forensic or ballistic evidence, and the gathering of evidence is taking place sometimes contemporaneous with a search for an assailant. There's a deep and rich history of cooperation and collaboration between and among law enforcement agencies. This is true at the local level, the state level, and indeed at the federal level. Federal law enforcement agencies have unique skill sets, access to resources and equipment, and other investigative techniques that can and do assist smaller police departments on a regular basis. But, Mr. Speaker, currently the FBI does not have the specific statutory authority to assist in all investigations, specifically with request to the investigation of mass shootings or other violent crimes occurring in non-federal venues. H.R. 2076, the Investigative Assistance for Violent Crimes Act of 2011, is a common-sense bill that allows the FBI to provide assistance to state and local law enforcement authorities if requested in response to a mass shooting or other mass casualty. This bill addresses when the FBI is asked to assist state or local authorities with mass shootings and mass killings at a public place, such as a shopping mall or a school. The FBI has traditionally assisted state and local law enforcement authorities, but the statutory authority explicitly granting the FBI jurisdiction is lacking. To be sure, the FBI helps and is willing to help, but the absence of a specific statutory grant of jurisdiction, even jurisdiction by invitation, needs to be resolved. This bill is not an expansion of federal authority, and it does not expand the authority of the FBI. Any assistance from the FBI must be requested by the state or local authority and agreed to by federal authorities. The FBI will only assist when state and local counterparts ask for help and they agree to provide it. This legislation, Mr. Speaker, is simple, but it is also critical. State and local authorities often look to the FBI for assistance in handling large violent crimes, but the FBI must look to federal law to determine what authority it has been granted by Congress before it can offer assistance. Accordingly, H.R. 2076 gives the FBI the specific authority to respond to requests for assistance from state and local law enforcement authorities when mass killings or other acts of violence are committed or attempted. H.R. 2076, Mr. Speaker, was passed out of the House Judiciary Committee by a voice vote with broad bipartisan support. This bill is also supported by the FBI Agents Association, a voluntary professional association currently representing over 12,000 active duty and retired FBI special agents. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from South Carolina reserves his time. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I begin by commending my colleague on Judiciary, TREY GOWDY, for introducing this bill and being the sponsor of it. And I agree with everything that's been said. I'll insert my remarks, but I'd like to ask my colleague about a shooting I read about just today. It wasn't a mass killing, but some of these things are so awful. A 17-year-old young girl athlete shot mysteriously. Do you see that that might be a role that we may want the FBI to be able to intervene in if they are invited as well?
Does the gentleman from Michigan yield to the gentleman from South Carolina?
Yes, I could, and I do.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan, and I would tell the distinguished former chairman of Judiciary, I'm not aware of a single instance in my 16 years as a prosecutor where the FBI was asked to provide help and didn't do so. And I know that my friend from Michigan would want the FBI to be on solid legal footing. So with respect to the shooting that you're referencing, and I fear that I'm familiar with that shooting, I believe I read about it, the tragic loss of life of a wonderful high school young lady who happened to be a tremendous basketball player. The FBI agents that I know would gladly help in that case, and if the gentleman from Michigan wanted to provide a way for the Bureau to help whenever requested, I would be happy to work on that with him.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and I think this is something that our committee might well want to look into, because the general impression is that crime is going down, and I assume that's accurate, but in some places it isn't. And I thank the gentleman for making sure that this assistance has, from the FBI, has a statutory basis, which it hasn't enjoyed until now. And I join with him in providing this assistance as a matter of law. And I urge the passage of the measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Michigan, and I am prepared to yield the remainder of my time and would allow the gentleman from Michigan to go first if he would like, and I will yield back the balance of my time if he's inclined to do so.
All time having been yielded, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2076 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection. Gentleman
I
from
ask
Michigan.
for a recorded vote.
Gentlemen ask for the yeas and nays.
Yes.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2633, the Appeal Time Clarification Act of 2011, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2633, a bill to amend Title 28 United States Code to clarify the time limits for appeals in civil cases to which United States officers or employees are parties.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 2633 as amended, currently under consideration.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
And is recognized.
I want to thank the ranking member of the Court Subcommittee, Mr. Cohen, distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, and the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Conyers, the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, for their having co-sponsored the bill. I introduced the bill, H.R. 2633, at the behest of the United States Judicial Conference. It addresses a small problem that must be fixed or attended to prior to December 1st of this year. Under the existing Rules Enabling Act, the Judicial Conference may develop changes to existing federal rules of procedure and evidence. The Supreme Court submits any agreed-upon amendments to Congress no later than May 1st of a given calendar year. The changes take effect on December 1st unless Congress intervenes during the interim. This year, as part of its rules package, the Supreme Court submitted proposed amendments to Appellate Rule 4 that clarify the treatment of the time to appeal in civil cases involving a United States officer or employee. Because the time to appeal in a civil case is set not only by Appellate Rule 4, but also by Section 2107 of Title 28 of the U.S. Code. The Advisory Committee on Appellate Rules has proposed that the Judicial Conference seek legislation to make the same clarifying change to Section 2107. Appellate Rule 4 and Section 2107 currently provide that the time to appeal is 30 days for most civil cases, but that the appeal time for all parties is 60 days when the parties to the case include the United States, a United States officer, or a United States agency. The problem is that current law is not clear concerning the applicability of the longer period in cases in which the federal party is a United States officer or employee sued in an individual capacity. The proposed amendments in H.R. 2633 simply clarify that the longer period applies to such an individual or employee just as it does to the United States government or a United States agency. A lawsuit against a federal officer or employee under these conditions requires the federal government to decide whether to represent that individual. This requires time, as the government must evaluate the case, determine whether an appeal should be taken, and ultimately obtain the Solicitor General's approval. The proposed revisions to Appellate Rule 4 are on a glide path to December 1. It's important to promote the consistency between the rules and Title 28 by ensuring that we enact H.R. 2633, which also takes effect on December 1st. The only change to the bill as reported by our committee is the inclusion of, quote, findings, close quote, language developed by the Senate Judiciary Committee. The main point of this text is to clarify that the 60-day period appeals to cases involving Article 1 litigants, including members of the House of Representatives and Senators. This addition is entirely consistent with the legislative history of the bill and is fully supported by the Judicial Conference. This will also help to expedite passage of H.R. 2633 by the other body. Mr. Speaker, this is a bipartisan legislation devoid of controversy. It treats federal litigants as fairly under the appellate rules and assists the courts in correctly interpreting those rules. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2633, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from North Carolina reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to claim as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I begin by congratulating Howard Coble, North Carolina, senior member of the Judiciary Committee, who is the sponsor of this bill, and agree with him entirely. It was reported by our committee by voice vote and no amendment. His explanation is thorough, and I appreciate his inclination for detail, which had us make this important modification of appeal time clarification. And I would, at this point, Mr. Speaker, submit my statement for the record and yield back the balance of my time.
Without objection, so ordered. And the gentleman from Michigan yields the balance of his time. The gentleman from North Carolina.
And I thank my friend from Michigan for his kind words. Thank you, John. And, Mr. Speaker, I also yield back the balance of my time.
All time having been yielded, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2633 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays on this measure as well.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1059 to protect the safety of judges by extending the authority of the Judicial Conference to redact sensitive information contained in their respective financial and disclosure reports and for other purposes.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 123, H.R. 1059, a bill to protect the safety of judges by extending the authority of the Judicial Conference to redact sensitive information contained in their financial disclosure reports and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 1059 currently under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I support H.R. 1059. And again, thank Mr. Conyers, the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, for having sponsored it. I also thank Mr. Cohen, the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Johnson, the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, for having served as co-sponsors. H.R. 1059 promotes an important goal, that is, providing security for federal judges. Under the Ethics in Government Act, judges and other high-level judicial branch officials must file annual financial disclosure reports. This requirement increases public confidence in government officials and better enables the public to judge the performance of those officials. However, recognizing the nature of the judicial function, and the increased security risks it entails, Congress also enacted legislation that allows the Judicial Conference to redact statutorily required information in a financial disclosure report where the release of such information could possibly endanger the filer or his or her family. Those seeking to harm or intimidate federal judges might use a disclosure form to identify where someone's spouse or child works or goes to school on a regular basis. However, targeting judges for harassment have also been known to file false, or individuals targeting justices for harassment have also been known to file false liens on properties owned by judges and their families. Harassers could use judicial financial disclosure reports to more easily identify such property. The Judicial Conference delegated to its Committee on Financial Disclosure the responsibility for implementing the financial disclosure requirements for judges and judicial employees under the Ethics of the Government Act. The committee monitors the release of financial disclosure reports to ensure compliance with the statute. In consultation with the U.S. Marshal Service, the committee also reviews and approves or disapproves any request for the redaction of statutorily mandated information where the filer believes the release of the information could endanger the filer or his or her family. Under the Judicial Conference regulations, no redaction will be granted without a clear nexus between a security risk and the information for which a redaction is sought. The law has worked well through the years and has been reauthorized twice since 2001, but it expires at the end of this calendar year if we fail to act, an outcome that is unacceptable. Last year, the Marshal Service investigated and analyzed almost 1,400 threats and inappropriate communications to judicial officials, nearly 3 times as many threats recorded in 2003. And there were more than 3,900 incidents and arrests at U.S. court facilities in 2010. Financial disclosures are an important part of maintaining an open and transparent government, Mr. Speaker, but government transparency should not come at the cost of personal security for government officials. Judges and other judicial employees perform important work that is integral to our democratic system of government. In order to preserve the integrity of our democracy, we must protect the integrity of our courts. And that means ensuring the security of judges and other judicial employees from intimidation and threats. In conclusion, there is no evidence that the law is being abused. I support H.R. 1059 and urge my colleagues to extend the redaction authority permanently. I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from North Carolina reserves his time. The gentleman from Michigan.
I rise to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend the Chairman of Judiciary, Lamar Smith, as well as the subcommittee chair, Mr. Coble, for swiftly moving this through the Judiciary Committee. I think it's been explained, the redaction of sensitive information for the benefit of members of the judiciary is obvious and important. And I am hoping that with my consultation with the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, we would be able to make the permanent feature that Howard Coble has discussed a permanent one and a part of the law as it now exists. I will put my statement in the record at this time and yield back the balance of my time, sir.
Without objection, and the gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I as well yield back the balance of my time.
All time having been yielded, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1059? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and the nays on this vote as well.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
Members are taking a break now, back at about 6:30 Eastern Time for recorded votes and